vendía. Yo no conoce este. ¿Qué pasó? Así es. Magnífico.
7:39 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, yesterday we heard from an attorney at law, Darren Wade. Now let's get a government perspective on the matter involving 26 Haitian nationals in Guyana who were supposed to have been deported. That has been stayed, and indeed allegations and accusations of racism against this new government of the PPP Civic. Well, we're joined now by Attorney General Anil Nandlall. When last we spoke to him quite a few months ago, we were still awaiting the final determination of those elections from March. It's now been resolved. He is the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs in the Republic of Guyana. Mr. Nandlall, thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of your program.
Good to have you with us. Your response to the allegations and the accusations, one of racism by the way this government, of which you are a part as Attorney General, has pursued this situation involving the Haitian nationals to get them out of your country.
The allegations are nonsensical, and the least said about them, the better. Fazeer, it's not about Haitians. The Caribbean region is facing its greatest, latest challenge in relation to immigration. You have a Venezuela, you have a Haiti, and you have a Cuba. Guyana is not unique in any respect. These are countries that are huge. Their population centers are massive, and any one of them can overwhelm the entire Caribbean region. So it's not a Guyana problem. It's a Caribbean problem that we are facing. I have had the privilege of sitting at heads of government meetings of the CARICOM, where this issue has been discussed at length and all its ramifications assessed and examined, and the devastating consequences it can have for the small economies of this region.
If you would allow me, Mr. Nandlall, I hear what you're saying, and I don't think there's any dispute to what you're saying. But I think the principal issue is there a case of discrimination towards the Haitians in particular?
Not at all. We are dealing with a situation where it is believed that there is a movement to assemble some 10,000 Cubans on Guyana soil before the end of December to converge at the U.S. Embassy here in Georgetown and or to join a caravan that will go over to Brazil on its way to Mexico along the highways of America. We have 1,000 or more assembled at the borders of Suriname attempting to cross illegally. These are Cubans. We have a complaint from the Brazilian government to say that Guyana is being used as a transshipment point for people smuggling into Brazil, and we are being blamed for that. We are not an island. We are a mainland, and we have extraordinarily wide borders that are almost impossible to monitor and to police. And we have we have treaty obligations that we are possibly in violation of because of our inability to curb this influx of illegal immigrants into our country. The 26 Haitians that you're speaking about, for example, we simply don't have the physical capacity to keep persons. Among those persons who are here, they have 2 children, and the persons who are pretending to be the parents of those children are not the parents, and they have conceded that to the authorities. The parents of these children are somewhere in the world. They are somewhere in French Guyana, but these people are said to be en route to Brazil. You have children smuggling involved here. You have children being exported to be used as sex slaves internationally. You have people smuggling allegations. You have human trafficking allegations. This thing is extremely complex, and this kind of simplistic interpretation of it is quite unfortunate and leads to these ridiculous assertions.
Okay, Mr. AG, I hear that point, but I'm reading from some of the reporting of this particular issue, and as I understand it, the Haitians are not protected by either being members of CARICOM or of Commonwealth member states, and you are quoted as saying that in the case of the Haitians, these persons are aliens under the Constitution. While that may be legally and factually correct, isn't it callous to merely take that position and get them out of your country?
No, let me say that. Let me say quickly, Fazeer, that those papers, when I made that statement, the legal papers were served on me just minutes before. I was in a court and I made statements that I later recognized to be not in accordance with the law. They're not even in accordance with the law. And those that issue will be addressed at an appropriate time. But in terms of the issue is, we have a previous Minister of National Security with responsibility for immigration saying publicly that thousands of Haitians are entering Guyana but are not remaining here, are going on to Brazil, and so that he's not worried about that. And that is exactly the position that the Brazilians held on to say, look, you are using Guyana as a transshipment point to send people over to Brazil. And that is the problem that we have. So countries throughout the Caribbean, Fazeer, as you may know, I believe including Trinidad and Tobago, have imposed visa requirements in relation to Haitians. We have not done that. St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Antigua, Barbados, Bahamas, they all have, Jamaica, they all have visa requirements. Possibly one can argue in violation of the Treaty of Chaguaramas, but they're there. Why? Because we have a problem. And we have to deal with it, in a serious way.
In a serious way.
And I know, I recognize that we are dealing with human beings, and we are dealing with children, and we are dealing with women. I'm not oblivious to that fact at all. That is what adds to the complexity of the situation.
Dealing with it in a serious way.
There is no right way out, perhaps. But governments sometimes have to make difficult decisions.
But in making that decision, and again, because like Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, because of the racially polarized nature of the politics, wouldn't you and your government be aware that you must, of necessity, recognize that you must not be seen to be acting in a manner which appears to be targeting a particular ethnic group?
No, of course we recognize that, and that was not the intention. We have taken a similar position against Cubans. As I said to you at the beginning, we have 1,000 Cubans at Naikiri ready to come over. We were supposed to open a ferry crossing between Naikiri and Quarantine, and we have postponed that because of not because of the ethnicity of the people, but because of the issue at hand, which is we are incapable of accommodating these large influx of persons. Right now we have, and then we are taken to the international community, into the United Nations Tribunal for violations of human rights. Where do we put them?
Guyana is a big place, Mr. AG.
They are in a civilian facility, and even that is found to be, not in keeping with standards.
But given these realities, Mr. Attorney General, and given the Venezuelan situation, which we don't have time to develop, which we'd love to hear your perspective on the challenges you face with Venezuela just on your western border, should there not be consideration by your government and subsequent government, because of what is happening globally, that accommodation be made for those who are coming to your country, whether in circumstances of desperation for economic reasons or otherwise? Because some will say, well, Guyana, unlike the small territories of the Caribbean islands, Guyana is a much larger place. You could find a place to put people.
Well, certainly a government has to take time to make decisions that have far-reaching ramifications economically, socially, and internationally. We have only been in government now for 3 months, and we have had to deal with a whole plethora of problems, and then this one just dropped on our lap just like that. So it is being carefully examined, and a policy. In fact, the president has a legal opinion from me currently on his desk. And I have asked that we craft a policy out of the law in relation to how we move forward. We are not comfortable with the situation in relation to the Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians, and whoever else trying to come, because we really have not crafted a policy to meet the exigencies of this relatively new phenomenon. Because this is quite new to us. It was not a situation that we had when we were in government in 2015. It's a situation that developed while we were out of government, and then we came into government. We had to deal with so many other things, but this is a matter of the highest priority, and we have to deal with it as a government. I recognize that.
Is there
and we have to do so in keeping with all of our obligations on the CARICOM, on the CSME, on the other international treaties and obligations.
Is there a political dimension to it, though? Because Attorney General Darren Wade raised, and he made clear his political affiliation in our discussion yesterday. He made it quite clear. And I basically asked him that, did he have a biased position because of his political position? And he denied that. But he also referenced a previous issue where people of African descent from the Caribbean islands, it became an issue that they were brought in by the PNC to vote for the PNC at an earlier elections. Is this what your government fears as well, that people who are non-Indian are coming into the country to vote you out of office?
Not at all. As I said, Darren Wade keeps looking at this thing myopically from the position of ethnicity and race. And it is not an issue of ethnicity and race. It's an issue of emigration and the capacity of Guyana to accommodate this without settled policies, parameters, infrastructures, etc. That is the issue, and that is why I keep referencing the Venezuelan situation and the Cuban situation. We have said to the Cuban ambassador, we have said to Suriname, deal with those people over there. We don't have the space to accommodate them here at this point in time. We have said to the Americans, you have to help us because they're coming here under some belief that they're going to get American visas. And I'm speaking about Cubans. I'm saying to you, sir, that we are dealing with this thing as a matter of issue and not ethnicity.
Okay, Mr. Nandlall. Finally, we just have a couple of minutes left. From what we understand, the deportation has been suspended. It comes up in the court again on the 18th, which is next week, Friday. What are you seeing here as the best scenario in this regard?
I am still carving a situation that will be, I believe, acceptable and mutually and legally palatable. It's not an easy situation, as I said from the beginning. We have the law, we have the treaty, etc. And we have our international obligations. We have signed on to every human rights treaty available in this hemisphere. United Nations, OAS, European Charter on Human Rights, etc. So we are not a country that is in any form or fashion lacking in terms of our international obligations vis-a-vis human rights. And we have, like every other country in the Caribbean, a human rights charter in our constitution. We have a constitutional court specifically put aside to deal with constitutional violations. And that is where this case is. But I prefer not to divulge what is transpiring in the court at this point in time, except to assure you that the rule of law will prevail and the rights of the Haitians will be respected by our government.
Mr. Nandlall, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this morning.
You're most welcome, sir. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and please feel free to engage me at your convenience.
Thank you very much indeed. And indeed, again, a good morning to our audience in Guyana, because as we began to understand during the course of the election hiatus from March until July, into August, into September, there was certainly quite a bit of interest being generated by the dialogues we were having, not just with those in Guyana, but Guyanese nationals and with those with Guyanese interests here in Trinidad and Tobago as well. So we'll see how this goes. It appears it goes to the court again next week, Friday, which is December the 18th. We'll see how that unfolds. Well, as we head to the break, and I'm sure Jamil will be happy that we're showing you another sunset, because that's why he watches Morning Edition as well. Here's a sunset at sea captured on the Cabo Star. We'll be back in a while.
This is Caribbean Vibes.